Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging fields of data science, data engineering, and artificial intelligence. This episode was recorded in front of a live studio audience. Virtually, of course. There are no more in-person events these days. Enjoy the show.
Hello, LinkedIn, Live, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, all the places. We're streaming all the things.
We are.
Welcome to Data Driven. I have with me my host, Andy Leonard, who is wearing a really cool t-shirt, if I do say so myself.
It's very familiar.
There you go. Data is the new oil.
Data is the new oil, yeah.
I am pulling up our merch site so we can shamelessly promote ourselves.
Absolutely, we should do that.
Help monetize the show in ways that are not obnoxious. There's a number of podcasts I listen to that I've actually stopped listening to because the ads are just obnoxious.
Oh, wow.
I mean, sometimes, I get it, right? You know, you have to pay. Trust me, no one understands more than us the cost of doing this sort of thing.
True.
Let me share my screen.
I'm sharing on social media that we're live now.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's what I'm doing.
Awesome.
I'm in the background here. What's interesting is when I did it on LinkedIn, it's actually got a little inset video going right now.
Oh,
kind of cool. So, yeah, I gotta get that.
There we go. I'm going to try to show this, but unfortunately, so they've gotten rid of the thing where it's like, you ever watch? I haven't watched it in years, but the Wheel of Fortune, they had like the thing where they're panning through the prizes and people are picking out their prizes and little heads in the bottom.
Yes.
Restream through the web browser used to do that. They've
Okay.
gotten rid of that, so you kind of have this this triple thing or this kind of thing. Actually, this is the least awful option. But if you look here, this is our store.
Yeah.
We have a muscle shirt with Data is the new oil. I might have to get hardcore back on keto for me.
I could do that and then show off the big tattoo on the right arm.
There you go. This is a new one that I had made. I actually designed these. And
you did a great job with those, Frank, by the way.
Oh, thanks. This one was my latest pip install donkeys.
Oh, I didn't see that.
This is kind of a pip install as a Python utility to install libraries.
Yes.
Like NuGet. I'm pretty sure there's other examples.
Gotcha.
But Python and C# are the two universes I spend a lot of time in.
Yeah.
So this started off as a joke on LinkedIn, actually, because somebody had moved away and somewhere I forget what it was. They were either snowed in or something like that. And ultimately it was they wanted to get Dunkin' Donuts and they didn't want to go out or something like that. And I just said, well, have you tried typing in pip install donkeys, which donkeys being the slang for Dunkin' Donuts in New England. So that kind of became, that'd be a great t-shirt. So, yeah, that would be an interesting, so anyway, a number of these, actually all of these I designed. Sometimes they even get me in trouble.
No way.
Hey.
Not you, Frank.
This is the famous one Twitter avatar.
Love that one.
Like
yeah,
that.
I got one of those. I think Stevie Ray wears it all the time now.
So it's popular with the kids because, or the youngsters or youngins, as they say, because this looks like my son has one of these as well, because it looks like the Obey stickers that you would see up and down kind of New York and the East Coast.
Right.
And when I did, you notice it says Data Graffiti and not Data Obey, is because they're very aggressive in Amazon merch about trademark.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they kind of got it.
Right.
It
was the Bayesian one that. So anyway, this one is also very popular.
Yeah.
There's a guy who went at different conferences.
Like it.
back when we would meet in person.
Yeah, we have
have
to
a.
say that.
I know. All right, so this isn't about shameless self-promotion. Just partially about shameless self-promotion. We actually make a fair bit of return on that, and it's fun too because you get to wear something. It's not
Oh yeah.
we get a cut of that shirt and stuff
Yep.
like
Yep.
that. We actually do have a couple of comments in the chat. Thanks for watching. Howdy from a LinkedIn user. For some reason, it didn't carry over the name, but I will make sure I give you a shout out when I look at my phone and see the actual comments. Here's an interesting comment from Manav Vananan, who I think was on my stream I did the other night. Okay. Could I give him on gold price and predict gold price will raise in September? That's actually not a bad idea. I want to get more into kind of the fintech side of things. There's certainly a lot of data.
Yeah.
But given how the economy is going globally, I would say gold is going to go up. The question is, how much is it going to go up?
Well, eventually it'll go up. I can say that. I don't know about September.
Right. Eventually it go up, but you want, right. I guess it depends on what you want to do. If you want to buy and hold for some time, then it's probably a good idea. If you want to buy and,
well, traditional. So what what you could do, Frank, just kind of rolling through this. I think we're fans of Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and he says you can't predict the future from the past. He's got some great points there. I mean, it's no doubt that he's smarter, way smarter than me, and probably a little smarter than you. But
I think he's a lot smarter. He knows a lot of big words.
He definitely does. What we call $3 words here in Farmville, Virginia. But
a little more expensive. They're $10.
Are they $10 up there? Well, that makes sense.
Well, county tax, state tax.
But when you think about, I mean, if you kind of zoom out, right? If you want to do, and I know this from predictive analytics. I've been working in predictive analytics since before I knew what it was called. And when you zoom out, when you reduce the resolution, you can see trends from the past that may or may not appear in the future. That's a safe way of saying it. But really, the less resolution you apply, I think it becomes a safer bet. Now, neither Frank nor I are financial, CPAs or financial people, so don't take our advice on spending money and trying to make money in the market. Also, we're not doctors. We're a couple of geeks. You want to listen to us about technology. We know pieces of technology. So all that being said, if you do zoom back, where I'm going with this is it's an election year in the U.S. And traditionally in election years, the markets behave in similar ways. And I say traditionally, but 2008 was out there. I mean, it was we were starting what's now called the Great Recession. So that was an outlier. But if you look at presidential elections in the United States every 4 years, this is 2020, we're coming up on one, then you will notice certain things. And one of the indicators is the price of gold. I think that would be a fairly stable. Again, they're going to be outliers, and
it all gets down into the fallibility of predictive analytics. Turns out predicting the future is hard.
Who knew?
Who knew? But I mean, if you look at the weather reports, and they're often right, but they're not always right.
Very true.
And I mean, it's the same. It's not the same processes, but I mean, even natural neural networks do have problems with predicting the future, and it's just not so. I don't think it's anything we can do with our current technology or foreseeable technology in terms of predicting particularly market fluctuations.
Right.
Now, I'm sure somebody has figured it out and they're filthy rich. Who knows?
Maybe,
but they're not going to share with the world.
They're not telling you and me, that's for sure.
Right, they're not telling me. But I mean, there's actually a video that Siraj Raval posted where it talks about AI predictive analytics and fintech, which is financial tech. He didn't write the paper or the code, but he does a great video around it, and that's all I'll say on that. I'm going to walk away from dropping his name and just leave it there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably better that way.
It's okay.
You know, a lot of people slam him, but I refuse to slam him because yes, he made mistakes, but he was inspirational in a time of very. He was a bright light in a dim room. For me, career wise. But that actually isn't a good segue into talking about what we're going to talk about. And since we are streaming on LinkedIn, and I'm not in a fancy shirt, I figured I would show off some of our merch at Data Driven. But basically, one of the things that's kind of come up, and I think I shared a link with you. I posted a couple of things lately about kind of what does a post-COVID IT career look like. Clearly, to quote Satya Nadella, big deal at Microsoft, by the way. You said, we've had, paraphrasing, because this may not be the exact quote, but we've seen 2 years or 2 decades we've seen 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months, is kind of what he was getting to, referring to the pandemic, where organizations had to quickly adapt, quickly scale up their services, quickly change their services. And that's something that with a traditional IT infrastructure, whether you had on premises, it was really hard to do, particularly if you have everything kind of behind a firewall and VPN.
Right.
My wife deals with this all the time because, where she works, their VPN was not, the bandwidth available to that VPN is very limited.
Right.
So it's interesting to see how the whole notion of zero trust computing, so it's not just about kind of the traditional way of IT security. And I'm not an expert in IT security. I wish I was.
Yeah, same here.
Wish I were. But it's definitely something I want to learn more about.
Yeah.
But in terms of the way that traditional way of thinking about that has been kind of like, traditional. You build a moat around your castle, you build up high walls, and you're impenetrable. But that's not the case. COVID is, even with or without COVID, that's not been the case. But I think what's interesting to see is this notion of a zero trust model. And I'm trying to convince, I work at the Microsoft MTC in Reston, and we have experts in security and other technologies. I'd love to have them either on the show as a proper podcast or on a LinkedIn live stream. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, this is actually being recorded live.
Yes. And broadcast to LinkedIn.
Because
Frank has that LinkedIn thing. I'm trying to get that.
I'm going to try to hook you up.
I don't have the pull that you do. I am no.
It involved bribing somebody with lots of beer. That's all I'll say. It is a great platform. We get a lot of connections. So I found out who this was. It was Rupesh. Rupesh, thank you for doing that.
Hey. Yeah.
And it's weird. So we're using a platform. We're going to geek out, sidetrack. It's what we do at Data Driven. Is we're using software called Restream. It's a service. And if you saw my other stream, I did a couple of streams with Restream. Awesome service. You can pipe your videos to 30 some odd different streaming services. But you can also do it through the browser. So they have a really, really high-powered browser tool. In fact, I'll actually show you some of this. How about this? How's that for high impact?
I like it.
There's a story behind that, so I'll have to share that one day. But but the short of that is, when the browser tool does a lot of good things. But if you saw us when we had to share our desktop, we didn't have a lot of control over how that works.
Right.
But if you have something called OBS Studio, which is free, you can have a lot more control. So I've been doing more experiments with OBS Studio. I have another computer just dedicated to that. And I have multiple cameras. So if you saw my screen, I think the the stream that I think Madhavan's name's familiar with, I actually had the multi-cameras and stuff like that. It was very slick. Haven't quite figured out how to do the remote guest thing. That's kind of next on my study guide. But I'm excited about kind of the, whether or not you get access to LinkedIn Live. But I mean, I'm just excited about the opportunity that exists for a lot of people who are would-be content creators.
Yeah.
There's enormous opportunity.
So true.
Because even when I was working out of the K Street office, doing a live stream was not trivial.
Yeah.
You needed special gear or equipment. I had a TriCaster Mini, and that was not something once I got laid off. That's not something I can justify spending on.
Sure.
But now with just a webcam, $10 headphones from Wegmans or whatever supermarket, and if you want to get fancy, a microphone, you can stream anywhere from any device. Although I did try to do the restream from my cell phone the other day.
Yeah, how'd that work?
It was abysmal.
Oh, okay. Well,
but it's science, right?
Yeah,
you try,
yeah.
you fail.
They're working on it, I'm sure.
Working on it. I actually wanted to do a stream discussing my solar generator that I built.
I remember that. I was going to ask you because I wondered how that was going. I know you got like marine batteries, right? And you put them in some kind of container.
Yeah. So it just so what this was originally was for. This was for the Frosty the Snowbot project, which was for the yes, that's what we actually called it, for the city of Boston, because they had a number of bad winters one year, and they issued a civic challenge and. One, to basically, turns out when snowfall gets over a certain amount, they want to make sure that structures are going to be safe.
Right.
And under normal years, they staff for normal years, but that was kind of a burst, and they were concerned about is that going to be commonplace, or what do they do if they're overwhelmed?
Right.
And probably, what do we do if we want to cost cut? Probably was part of it too. But the key was. Automating that. So kind of thought about how would you automate that. So the long and short of it was we went with a kind of a digital scale type technology that fed the data into an Arduino, and then the Arduino read it off a Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi read it off the Arduino and then beamed it back to somewhere. It's like cool. what the load was on it.
Very cool.
It was very cool. But that was my first real IoT project.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned was just the simple fact that in an IoT project, you have to think about things like power consumption, power use.
Sure.
Turns out that they were not real keen about, well, just throw an extension cord out the window of any building and put this on top of. So the long and short of it was that led to me building a solar battery. And what's interesting about this, let's see if I can pull up the video while I'm talking. This is actually my most viewed video on YouTube. By a significant margin. So for those of you who don't know, I guess you could be watching this on YouTube right now. But I started my YouTube channel some years ago. Never really quite worked out. The hope of getting, retire from YouTube, being the next PewDiePie or whatever. I'm still we're also streaming this to YouTube right now. Yeah, so, cool. But you'll see this video actually has 37,000 views.
Wow, Frank.
Yeah. So there's definitely something that's very popular with folks. And I'm not showing it.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. I might have overdid it with the graphics.
No, not possible.
Yes.
The graphics are awesome.
Possible. I don't know. Can you hear the audio on this or no?
I can't right now.
Okay. So that's something else I have to figure out.
Yeah. But it's called,
but ultimately,
the name. It says Coleman 55 watt solar generator kit unboxed.
Right. So what's really cool about this is I do a whole unboxing. And kind of show the solar panels. I'll jump ahead. And I apologize for our podcast listeners.
Yeah, you can't see this.
You
I imagine
can't
it'll
see
be
this.
somewhere. It'll be on LinkedIn. Yes.
Yeah, well, I'll be on LinkedIn. It's on YouTube. The video is on YouTube.
Okay, there'll be video there.
Just go to franksworld.tv, and it's literally the only video with like more than, well, I don't want to say, but it's the only video with 37,000 views.
Gotcha.
I'll put it that way.
Yep.
But so that was the unboxing for that. But then the second video, which isn't as popular, at just about 3,000 views, is again overdoing it with the graphics. Where
Chris.
I talk about.
I saw Chris's comment. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Chris. Chris is a colleague of mine at Microsoft, so
cool.
Thanks, Chris. We should have him on the show one of these days and kind of talk about what he's up to, because I know he's up to some interesting stuff.
Very cool.
But only he would know if he's allowed to talk about it.
So true.
So if you look here in the video,
This is the one I remember, because I remember seeing the
Yes.
container, and that's like a marine battery, right? 12 volt.
that is a deep cycle marine battery, and the deep cycle thing is the important part, because with a solar battery, your battery solar power being what it is, turns out it only works in daylight hours. Who knew?
Crazy.
So you have to store that surplus energy somewhere, and where you store that is in a battery.
Right.
And there's actually interesting innovations in terms of what a battery means.
Okay.
Whether that's pumping a bunch of water up a hill and then creating your own hydroelectric kind of consumption later. There's also something called a gravity battery, which is basically you take a heavy weight, you drill a hole in the ground, and you take a heavy weight, and you use whatever energy that's temporary, you wheel that up, and then you drop it when you need power. There's also flywheels, stuff like that. There's a whole discipline of electrical engineering. Who knew?
Yeah.
But if you look here, that was just a waterproof box.
Yeah.
I think the over thing I'm talking about here is, that's the battery I got. It's a Duracell Marine Deep Cycle technology.
Okay.
And what you do is you put that in the box. The video overlay that I overdid with the graphics had to do with, because this was being installed in New England in the winter, you have to kind of overdo what your solar power was.
Sure.
So for a solar, ultimately we were talking about a Raspberry Pi and Arduino. This is probably overkill. I'm not an electrical engineer, but I do love the notion of overkilling stuff. No,
Absolutely.
So you do have to kind of factor in your latitude into that.
Okay.
And this is the video with the Johnny Cochran cameo, because in the video, I have these electrical gloves, and they only had one size at Home Depot, so it barely fit. And I said, "Yeah, these gloves barely fit. What does that remind me of?" And for you kids at home who have no idea what I'm talking about, it's on Wikipedia. Anyway, this is the connector I get out of it. And what's really cool, actually, about having this on YouTube is that I actually get comments on these videos to this day.
Oh, wow.
And I made this particular video, I think, is 5 years old.
Yeah.
The other one is 6 years old. And there's still stuff I'm learning. So I called that a proprietary connector. Apparently, that's called a CEA. It's called a C connector.
Okay.
I don't know what that means, but it's an acronym for something. So what you're seeing on the screen now is the solar charge controller. And what this does is this makes sure that the battery's not being overcharged.
Right. That's important.
And this is critically important, because if you don't do that, the battery will explode.
That's bad.
I don't know about you, but fiery hot acid flying all over the place.
Yeah, that's bad.
Sounds like a bad thing.
Yes.
And so what you're seeing here is the solar charger going into that. And then what I do is I plug it in. I probably would have been okay without the gloves, probably, but
You can't be too
I don't
careful.
know enough.
Right?
It's better to be careful.
I'll say this.
All right,
So
great.
I was actually an electrician for a few years.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I was a licensed master electrician and electrical contractor for a few years. This was a
Nice.
career before this latest foray. But I never wired a house or anything. I always worked in manufacturing instead of 240, 120 like we have in our homes. I was
Mhm.
all over 483 phase. So
Whoa.
yeah, 277, three legs of
We
277.
we should do a deep dive on
We
electricity.
could do that, but the thing is, a lot of people don't realize just how dangerous electricity can be in a battery. So especially those types of
Oh,
batteries. There, I mean, if you think about DC versus AC, you know, DC will grab you and not let you go. So
and not the city. Not
no,
the
not
city.
the city, but but yeah, you get the wrong kind of connection going there, Frank. It would be bad.
Right.
And AC, you know, the thing about working with the higher voltage AC, right, 480.
Kills you faster, right?
Well, it would know whatever got between the terminals. You know, if you put your hand in there and hit two, it would probably blow it off. So you'd live, but you'd be missing a piece. But
Interesting.
yeah, it's
So
surprising.
don't play with electricity at home,
Don't do
kids. We're
that.
not
Wear gloves like Frank did there. That's the recommendation from a former licensed electrician.
There you go. Well, I have questions because I want to build out more solar powered stuff that we should probably do a deep dive on.
You know, it's amazing the
Um,
tech that they've come up with around that. And it's not just, you know, the solar panels, which are incredibly, you know, way more powerful than they were just a few years ago. But a lot of the research that has come out of Tesla and companies like that on the
yeah.
batteries, it's just we've like done a quantum leap in just the past few years. So
Yeah, and battery tech has lagged for decades.
it
I
has.
mean,
I wonder
and a
why.
lot of people. I
Don't
don't think
answer
the
that.
demand was. Mhm. I don't think the demand was really there until, you know, I mean, the idea of having the, you know, your phone doesn't last the whole day. I think that's becoming more and more of a pain point.
Right, right.
The ability to store energy. I don't know. I think with electric cars, I mean, with current battery tech, there's no coincidence that Tesla put a lot of money in the research on it
Yeah,
because.
and I mean, there was the research was ongoing, from what I understand. You know, a lot
Mhm.
of people were working on stuff like that anyway, but they weren't getting a lot of traction, and so
Right, because I think there's only but so much you could do with chemical batteries, and
yes,
that's what you're seeing here. There are certain limits. There's certain heavy metals,
yep, rare earth,
and not like ACDC, different type of heavy metal
right,
or
right.
Metallica.
Ah, got it.
Um, boom, boom. I don't have the drum
We
thing
need the
here. I should
drum
probably
thing.
get that. Well, actually, here I can do the video. Here we go.
That was cool.
That was cool. I have a lot of fun with the graphics still.
But you're right. There's been a
Um,
lot of advancement in this, and this was the first project I'd seen anybody build. You know, this piece out, and I thought, just my opinion, I thought you did a fantastic job. I
oh,
thought
thank you.
it was well engineered, and it was you know, it was a great project. And
I had literally no idea what I was doing.
well,
It was
you did a
me.
fine job. And did you?
But I mean, that's kind of the fun of it,
Excuse
right?
me.
Like, you learn stuff,
Oh
and
gosh,
because it was electricity, I kind of erred on the side of
you
caution.
did well. So, is this still working, Frank, or is it out there
So
still?
it was dismantled, and the parts were kind of scattered to the wind in the 4 years since I built it.
Mhm.
But I was kind of stuck at home because of the quarantine, and I just why not? Like, why not rebuild it?
Sure.
I didn't think the battery would still hold the charge after being dormant for that long, but apparently that's one of the things that marine batteries are used to doing. So I actually have it now, and I had this idea to kind of get the kids more into science because kids have been out of school and
Yeah.
kindergarten's not going to happen in any meaningful way. Um, the county I live in Maryland, actually wants to do Zoom kindergarten.
That that would sound. I don't know. When I think of that, I think
That sounds like a punchline to a Saturday Night Live skit.
the word I thought of was challenge.
It just sounds like a parody of itself, and it's just like, anyway. So yeah, so I built this out, and what I wanted to do was, and since I didn't know anything about electricity, this kit did come with a cigarette lighter adapter.
Nice.
So you'll see here in the video, I'm plugging it in, and I'm doing a descriptive service for the folks on the call. And so basically, I plug it in into the socket, and that's my alternator. So you mentioned AC, DC. So for those on the call that don't know, because I kind of knew but didn't really know. So there's two types of ways of delivering electricity. There's probably more, but the two main ones that we interact with are alternating current, AC, or DC, direct current. Alternating current, get this, the current flow alternates.
That's crazy talk right there.
How'd they come up with that name?
I don't know.
Anyway, and there's reasons for that, which I sort of understand, but not well enough to present on. And then there's direct current, which basically the current kind of stays flowing in one direction.
So
the stuff in your wall
right.
is alternating current. The stuff in your battery, your cell phone battery, is direct current.
Correct. So I'll jump in.
Did I do a good job?
You did a fantastic job. I'll jump in and just share this little tidbit that I didn't come up with. I can't remember who shared this with me, but I thought it was a great idea. A great way to describe it. So direct current, everything's making a circuit, root word circle, right? And the electrons are physically moving in one direction. They're being shared as they move around this big circle in the conductor. Okay? Alternating current, and this is the part of the description I really like, is the electrons move down the conductor for some amount of time. And then they stop and they turn around and come back up the conductor for a certain amount of time. So when you see a sine wave representing alternating current, what you're really seeing, what that represents is, you can think of this same circle, right? But the electrons are going down and coming back. They're being pushed down the circle.
Oh, so that's why the sine
back.
wave up, it's going outbound and
That
it's coming back.
And the frequency at which they do that, the frequency at which an electron starts here, goes all the way down, stops, and comes back.
So that's 60 hertz in the U.S.?
60 hertz, which would be 60 cycles per second. And
so 60 times a second, it's flipping back and forth.
Right.
So the
So
electrons are going away.
It's going one way for 1/120th of a second, stopping and coming back the other 1/120th of a second. That 2/120th is 1/60.
So given that they travel at the speed of light, you can figure out where the electrons in your house are typically moving to.
True. Speed of light through a conductor, and it varies with conductors.
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
It's that whole thing where if you've got the pool and you put a straight thing in it, it looks bent because the speed of light travels through different mediums at different physical speeds. In a vacuum, it's 186,000 miles a second?
Something like that.
Yeah, and then other things, it's way slower. So, yeah, it is. It is very interesting to think about it that way because a lot of Maxwell came up with a way to kind of relate mechanical equations to electrical energy, and it's brilliant work. It was I love it because it was the first time I was exposed to design patterns was when I learned about Maxwell's equations. So
interesting.
Yeah, it turns out physics works.
Well, it's kind of funny because in traditional education, those would be completely different subjects.
Well, and the thing is, electrical engineers electronics engineers, electrical engineers back in the day all got physics degrees.
Right.
So that it became a different discipline later, which I'm not so sure that was a good thing, to be honest.
I can see why you'd want to specialize.
I get it, but yeah, I mean,
if you're a research physicist and the guy at the car shop tells you your alternator is broken and starts throwing stuff at you, or you need electrical work done on your house,
right?
And you can probably spot if you're being lied to. I'm just going to guess on that one. I don't know.
Yeah, most of the time.
I once talked to a college kid at university in Baltimore. I forget the name, but it was Baltimore. Anyway, I spoke to him, and he was a double E major, like in his junior year, and he wanted to switch to computer science. And I'm like, you sure you want to do that? Sounds like the worst of it's behind you.
Yeah.
because certainly a lot of folks who were double E's, you know, go on to do things, and I recommended you just stay the course because you can always do computer science. And
I know a lot of people in this field, Frank, that are doing data science and data engineering and, you know, and computer science type work, programmers, developers,
right,
that have degrees in some discipline of engineering. I mean, there's an amazing amount of overlap.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of thought process.
It really is.
All right, so back to the subject at hand. What you're seeing in the video, it's what we do. It's what we do.
That's what we do.
Let us know in the comments if you like the sidetrack. We're a bit like Family Guy that way, right? We kind of do those what do they call them? There's actually a word for what they do at Family Guy. The side, like where they'll mention like,
I know what you're
well, I'm not gonna, you know, like my favorite one still is the one that kicked off the giant chicken stuff. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I don't take coupons from giant chickens. Not after what happened last time. And then they cut away to what happened last time. And it's called Cutaway.
That's it. Yep, Cutaway.
Sorry.
Cool.
So yeah. So what you're seeing here is I'm plugging in an inverter,
Yep.
which takes the direct current and converts it into alternating current. And there's actually interesting because a lot of the ones, the better quality ones, talk about having a pure sine wave.
Yes.
So that probably mimics how the power company sends you power to your house better than, I guess there's ways you can just flip it this way, that way. And there's probably more, that's why the more expensive ones talk about the pure sine wave.
Yeah. What I'm
Now,
curious
light bulbs
about,
probably don't care,
well,
but expensive electronic equipment do care.
what I'm curious about is what did you plug into here? You plugged something into the, you know, the 110, 120 volt AC coming out.
Yeah, I plugged in a webcam.
Okay. And didn't the webcam
because-
then reconvert this back to DC?
Yes, so that actually, it's funny because I say that in the video. I'm like, well, it's probably not the most efficient way because if you see in my hand, the wall wart is going to convert that AC back to DC. So probably the better thing to do would be to figure out how to get the voltage from, I think it's a 5 volt. It's upstairs now, so probably look at it. But I think it's a 5 volt. So basically so I even say that this is rather kludgy, and all of that's because I didn't really understand electricity.
Oh, it's all good. You may
but you're absolutely right.
You may actually be safer doing it this way.
I felt safer doing it this way than like me soldering stuff together because like I know that I didn't know.
Yeah.
I was consciously ignorant, as they say.
Well, so like 12 volt DC power supplies that'll allow you to do stepping up and stepping down. A good one would probably be way more expensive than just inverting it, you know, throwing it into an inverter and then, you know, having the inverter feed a power supply that changes it down to, steps it to DC and the proper voltage. I think you made the right call, especially for a home hobbyist. I don't know that I would do it differently, Frank, because it's a lot less trouble and fewer moving parts. So,
and I had the plugs. This thing goes into that thing. Turn it on.
Right.
Didn't blow up. That's my knowledge of electricity.
You did good.
But it's interesting. Somebody called me out on that. Like, you know, I know it's hypothetical for your video.
Right.
But you know, you would never take a 12 volt DC. I mean, it's YouTube comments. As YouTube comments go, this is absolutely stellar, angelic even.
Yeah.
But he says, why would you do that? And he's like, oh, I paused the video, and then you said that in the video that probably isn't the most efficient thing.
And yeah, that's the only thing I would say about it is the inefficiency.
Right.
But given that you're drawing so little power at the end of the pipe, and see that's the thing, right? You need the power to power the webcam, and it looks like it had an antenna on it, so it's talking wirelessly.
Right.
So there's that. That's really all it's doing. It's running those two, and those are 5 or 12. They may have even been 12 volts at the very end of the pipe.
I don't know.
Now, if it had been 12 volts DC, I'd have probably run it straight.
No, I remember at least being smart enough to read the back of the wall wart. And wall wart is the thing you plug into the wall. It looks nasty, the big chunky thing. I remember looking at the back of that, and I was like, it doesn't match up. I'm not going to mess with it.
Yeah, no, like I said,
I would have been a lot braver if it had been the same.
you're going to have still,
voltage.
the efficiency is probably going to be driven by the amount of power that's being drawn through it at the end. So if you
Right.
were,
But
trying to
certainly
run
not 55 watts.
well, if you're trying to draw like a big blower fan or something crazy like that,
Right. That
then
would be
yes,
much.
that would have been way inefficient. But you weren't doing that. You're running a webcam and a transmitter.
Right. So I figured it was worth it, and it was actually on. So part of the use case for this is I took the old parts that I built for the Snowbot, and I wanted to do like my own kind of roll your own wildlife cam.
Oh, cool.
So I had a couple of ideas for this. Thomas Duclos commented. Thank
Oh
you.
yeah. Hey, Thomas. Well,
So anyway, the key here is I wanted a wildlife cam,
right.
and because my dogs would bark in the middle of the night, and I just want to see what they were barking at.
Yeah.
You
Good
know.
call.
So I would put this out. The use case was I put this out somewhere in my backyard, pointed at the guy. I have 1 acre. This guy has like 8 acres. Just kind of pointed at those woods there.
Yeah.
It has night vision, right? So a lot of those webcams, they have the night vision. So I just wanted to see what was out there, and I had it out there, and I had it in the camera itself in a protective cover. And it was cool because I could remotely like turn, pan it. And stuff like that.
That is cool.
Yeah. And so what happened, and this I did not anticipate, again, second IoT project.
Right.
Turns out that below a certain temperature, the mechanism that rotates the camera fails.
That makes
Or
sense.
it doesn't work. I don't know why. When it stopped rotating, I'm like, oh crap, I broke it. And but once I brought it inside and waited till a day or so, it magically came on.
Started back to work. So
Um,
maybe the solution would be a heated enclosure, but that would definitely draw more power.
right, because you're not getting the heat for free.
Right. Interesting.
But yeah, so I that was the end of my experiment because
Gotcha.
I kind of had seen what I did.
Well,
So one of the things I wanted to do in the absence of school, and my mom's an engineer, my wife's an engineer, I'm an engineer. We're all kind of geeks here.
yeah.
And I wanted to get them, one, off their iPads, and two, kind of get them more interested in kind of the tech behind the iPad. And I was like, the younger one is really into making sure his iPad's fully charged. So what I want to do is I want to kind of like, I have an idea. Let's try to keep charging up our devices, but only using the sun.
That is a cool idea.
So, and because it's a solar battery, you don't have to plug it in anywhere. Another use case I had was this was kind of really sad and geeky. I'm not even sure I should say it, to be honest. But when they had school,
Yeah.
the school bus stop is about 10 feet outside the range of our wireless network. So, and of course, that brought all sorts of tears and screaming and yelling, which is probably more of a statement of how terrible a dad I am.
That's not true.
To have them that reliant on Wi-Fi signal. But
That's not true. That's not you.
well, thank you. So I thought, well, I have an old router.
Yeah.
I could pair it, kind of do the like a repeater,
Yeah.
but take some of that gear and somewhere in the empty field, next to my house that I don't own and apparently nobody owns, but that's a whole other story. Just drop that Home Depot thing and the solar panels.
Yeah.
And have a repeater.
Boom.
I never proceeded with that because the more I thought about it, the more sad and pathetic it sounded. That maybe the kids could deal with waiting 5 minutes a day with no cell phone.
But
signal
it's
or
5 minutes.
That's a whole 300 seconds.
I'm telling you, man,
Yeah.
we have the same thing here with the junior engineers, as I like to call my kids who live at home. The junior engineers, yeah. Sometimes the image will start breaking up and stuff. That's when they're probably up to 3 or 4 things streaming and downloading at the same time. See the lights
Yeah.
dim every now and then. Just yeah. I tell
But
people
in terms
I'll
of,
do meetings, like before 10 o'clock because they're not up.
yeah, yeah, well, that's a good point. And at least where I have, we actually upgraded to gigabit Ethernet.
That's just crazy, man. I'm all the way up to 25 megs here.
Wow. We still don't know. We still haven't gotten the full gigabit. I do speed testing and
Oh, that's funny
um,
times.
but oh, that's awesome. That's going on the board. Thank you, Thomas, for the comment. That's actually a wicked cool idea. Is to just name that Wi-Fi hotspot with FBI surveillance.
I think Stevie Ray has the hotspot named something like that on his phone.
Nice. Well, fortunately, I live in a better neighborhood than I grew up in. I would imagine if I threw that up in a neighborhood I grew up in, there would be a lot of panic.
It could. Out here in Farmville, we have similar things. But
Yeah.
it's nice to have 25 meg DSL out here because depending on the weather and how tight the string is between the cans, we sometimes get like 27.
Broadband in the United States is a joke. I mean, it's just there's just no.
But I get it, right? I mean, we're both people who do statistics. We can do a cost benefit analysis probably in our heads. We know how much it takes to run fiber everywhere. They're
Right,
interesting.
right.
They're actually out here not far, about a half mile up the road. They were pulling this big bundle that looked like fiber not long ago. And I was like, I wonder if they're coming down our road. Because if they do,
Cool.
I could go out there with the cutters and the no, I wouldn't.
Fiber's a lot harder to splice. I'm just gonna.
I learned how to do that.
But I know a guy.
Another way back.
Just saying.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's not trivial.
Yeah.
It's not like coaxial, where that's a lot easier to do.
Yeah. But Iron Man made it look so easy, and he was even doing it underwater.
Yeah, but that's Tony Stark, though. He's way smarter than. He might even be smarter than Taleb. Maybe. If he, Anyway, but the whole thing that I think has come up, and we've kind of danced around this in terms of careers for folks, because this is what the originally titled LinkedIn live feed. But that's a problem with us because we do so many cutaways, a bit like Family Guy, with a little bit less crude jokes. As the notion of this came up when I was doing me, I'm an online course maniac.
How many search?
Oh, I actually counted up how many I've taken.
How many search?
Drum roll.
Yeah.
64.
64. You've hit another power of 2. My God.
That's right. I thought it was like 58 because you asked me. I found out it was 64. Because so what I ended up doing was I just copied and pasted the HTML from the webpage because LinkedIn used to tell you the count.
Yeah.
They don't anymore. So I was like, well, I'm going to write a script and I'll, parse the HTML in Python and count up how many things. So I started doing that. And I'm like, just for grids, why don't I just copy and paste into Word? And it turns out every one of because when I saw every one of those elements was an LI in HTML, which are a list item. I'm like, so I pasted it into Word and turned it from an unnumbered list to a numbered list, and poof, I had my number.
You're so smart. You'll teach those people to take away your certification count.
Right? Well, no, it just reminded me of something that Bill Gates is attributed to. I don't know if he actually said it, but lazy people are going to find the most efficient path in that sense.
That's what I say about engineers all the time. We're not lazy.
It's true. Well, like by the time my IDE had opened up, I had my answer. I was like, oh, well, that was easy. Well, not only that, like now I know how to find it in the future, and now you who are listening or watching know how to do that too. But one of them was this whole thing where they were talking about what is data engineering, and the way they phrased it was kind of weird. It was phrased in the sense that like data engineers move and tidy up and clean the data for data scientists.
That's fair.
And I do remember the name of the instructor. I'm not going to call him or her out on that, but I'm like, not the case in any project I've been on, but okay. But it also, I don't think this was the intent, but I think it made the data engineer more subservient sounding, the way I read
wow.
it. And
Okay.
it was just kind of weird, and I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, I would argue that in terms of career stability, I think there's a couple of things kind of in motion. This is just me spitballing, as they say, kind of thinking out loud, which might be dangerous to do on a live stream now, so I think about it. Is I think the real growth in career, certainly for the next 5 years, is going to be the data engineer. And here's why. Not the data scientist, not the AI engineer. And I know right now I can feel it, Andy. I can feel it. All the eyeballs looking at me like, And for those of you on the podcast, I was making a fist thing, punching the other fist. It's not a knock on it. I think there's a lot of talk about an AI winter. So if you're not familiar with the term AI winter, AI winter was the terms of that AI research, AI innovation tends to come in waves, right? When Alan Turing kind of first posited the idea of what artificial intelligence would look like, what would it do, there was an initial flurry of activity.
Sure.
But then we hit the processing of the time was just not up for it, right? So it kind of died. 80s, same thing. That's when a lot of research into neural networks were done and stuff like that. People are surprised to hear that this was not invented by Facebook in 2010. Apparently, no. It actually goes back further. Who knew? So the wave there is that. So Thomas Duclos said. So depending on who you talk to, there's been several winters, right? So some people don't count the one in the Turing era winter, right?
They count zero.
But yeah, maybe that's right. So the 0th one was Turing, but the second item in the list, how's that for?
I like that.
Was in the 80s, right? Because there was this big flurry of activity, right? Particularly around neural networks. But if you know one thing about neural networks, they do love themselves some power, some CPU power. And then the field kind of died. And I was a freshman in college in the early 90s, and I took an AI class. I'm thinking like, ooh, AI, yay. But it was just basically Prolog. That's basically what it was.
It wasn't.
Prolog can infer relationships. Ooh, yay.
Not what?
Well, here are my I'm not saying it was a bad class, but here are my expectations. And for those of you on the podcast, I'm raising my hand real high. And even for those on the camera, I don't think what the reality was much less. So then that began. The second winter was kind of in the 80s, right. And then obviously now it's definitely we're in kind of the highlight. But there's a lot of rumblings about AI innovation, AI research is kind of stalling because we're running out of processing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We keep hitting the limits of hardware. But
right.
So we'll see another. What I'm seeing is the cycles are shortening. Even if you go from the
right.
Turing to the 80s, and then from the 80s forward, and we saw good engineers doing what good engineers do. Right? They find a way to solve the problem. They, you solder together a circuit, the motherboards, so that you do massive parallelization. While where it's literally manual. You are connecting. There was a lot of that sort of stuff that went on, and then people discovered GPUs do a lot of the same math that we need for neural networks, and so it came back. And we're right on the cusp, Frank, of a phenomenal, quantum computing, right? Phenomenal promise.
I was gonna say, like, it's not all bad news, right?
No.
So don't think this may, like you said, if you zoom out enough, there's definitely patterns to things. And I'm not saying that we're going to face another AI winter that's going to shut this down 30 years. No, absolutely not. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
So maybe put down the laser scoped like thing and the lead pipe. Um, but I think that is it's the chance of that happening in data science terms is non-zero.
Yeah.
But there are some bright things to think about. One of which is quantum computing, which could alleviate a lot of this pressure. Two, we're not there yet. We haven't hit the wall yet, but it's not necessarily going to happen. But I would say is that the thing that the thing that gets the title, right, the clickbait titles, right, or AI learns how to do this, right? AI learns how to do that. What you don't hear is the massive, impressive engineering that happens behind the scenes to move 10 million images from point A to point B, or
And the thing
line
that,
of text and how to.
we keep beating on this because I think because we work in this industry and around this technology, the things that catch my eye and your eye are decidedly less clickbaity. Like,
Right.
it's the things like the natural language processing that will mimic any accent anywhere. We were goofing around with this. You remember a couple of years ago, you and I were on the phone together, and we were going somewhere. I think we were riding from Sequel Saturday or something, and you kept playing, the similar phrases in different accents, and just showing off what we had then. Now we're able. It's like you said. We're not going to be able to distinguish the difference between the real and the fake now. And
so I'm glad you mentioned that, because starting with our 3-year birthday anniversary special for the podcast, our voiceover is AI. It's an AI generated voice.
There we go.
Which, when you first heard it, you thought I had contacted. You said that lady, who did the voiceover work, sounds a little different.
I did say I thought it was the same lady. I thought she was 3 years older.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, like, in the sense that so what that enables us to do is to customize those messages.
Right.
Now, I could have done that before, but again, the cost was not worth it.
Right.
But one of the things that we're pondering, it's also fun to kind of make her, we call it the voiceover, AI, her. It's kind of very meta that a show about data and science and AI is a AI voiceover announcer. And there's other creative ideas we were thinking. Is that what if somebody wants to sponsor us or do a Patreon type thing, hey, for $5, we can have her say, this show is, in a posh British accent, this show is sponsored by so and so. I mean, it's just
go ahead.
No, so the cost to me to do that is just the time it takes to do it, which is,
a few minutes.
There's an interface for it. I type it in, I hit create. That's it. Whereas before, she would give you like a 24-hour turnaround, but it starts at $35-$40. Right. Prices have also gone up in the last few years.
Way more than what you're paying now.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment in terms of, well, what does that mean for voiceover work in general? What does that mean for actors in general? I mean, it's just an interesting kind of thing where the AI is going to take jobs, but not always in the obvious.
Well, and that's what we've keyed on, I think, throughout the show, especially through the data points you and I have done, where we talk about, like, I remember I did one in Baltimore Harbor where it was an automated parking attendant, if you will, and you would grab a ticket when you came in and when you go out, and it's a dumb little thing, but somebody's not making minimum wage because of that. And at Walmart, it's the same thing here. We have now more automated lanes for checkout than we have human lanes. And I heard a joke about that Walmart they did actually decide to close on Thanksgiving this year, which I think is a pretty cool move. But the rest of it, the jokey part is now both of their checkout people can go home and spend Thanksgiving. So, because there's only 2 lanes open no matter when you go to Walmart. One thing you said, though, Frank, rolling back a few minutes, when you talked about the relationship between a data engineer and a data scientist or AI person, You saw that as a little subservient. I don't, and I am a data engineer. I see it as the data science AI person, reports developer, whomever, analyst. They're my customer. And so,
Right.
am I serving them? Sure, but do I feel subservient to them? No, no more than I would working for anybody else.
Well, the way I phrased that, let me clarify, because if you misinterpreted,
Did I? I'm sorry.
I'm sure. No,
That
no, no,
happens a
no, no, no.
lot. I
So,
do
so
that a
no,
lot.
it could have been on me. The way that the instructor on this course phrased it
Mm, I
seemed
got
that way to
you.
me.
I got
I don't believe that for one
you.
bit,
Okay, good.
because I think ultimately, you know, ultimately, data. This is what I was getting at, because I was talking to somebody about career advice, and they were like, want to do data science, want to do data science. I'm like, awesome, love your spirit. However, the data science field is a lot more crowded today than it was 2 years, 4 years. I mean, two. I mean, go back. It's been exponential growth. Exponential growth is awesome,
Yes.
but you know the bad thing about exponential growth is eventually it stops.
Eventually, yeah, yeah,
And then what happens? There's a lot of people that are thinking that and there are people that did this. If I got into data science just a few years before I did,
yeah.
I would have a friend of mine, awesome friend. Unfortunately, he's laid off now, but he had the waterfront condo, like in a fancy building, like you know he went he achieved that,
Right.
like the crazy car, the crazy TVs, like
Yeah,
because he made a fair bit of money because he was there. He was the right place in the right time.
yeah.
Now I joined just a few years later because I'm slow, I guess.
No,
Um, but one of these days, man, Windows Phone's going to make a comeback. No. um, Thereby hangs the tale. So I can laugh about it now. But anyway, the thing is that, I got in at the right time,
yeah,
right? Anyone who comes in will get in and they'll do well. But the thing that kind of concerns me is whether they're, is that the riches and Lamborghinis that you think data science is not there anymore.
yeah,
I missed it. I'm not saying it's a bad career choice, because it is a good career choice. However, I do think that there's a risk of there being a glut of data scientists on the market.
Well, and you know what drives that, right? Is those
Right.
Lamborghinis at the
So
waterfront.
I once worked for a company, right? This is kind of like Machiavelli, like when he wrote The Prince. He's like, I know a prince who did this. And then, like, to us, we have no idea who he's talking about. But people back then, there's a reason why he died in hiding. You know what I mean? So, but there was once a consulting company that, at one point, SharePoint was everything. Everything was SharePoint, right? Because the bill rates on SharePoint were through the roof.
Right.
But, guess what happens? I hear about that. I'm like, I want some of that.
Right.
You hear about that. I want some of that.
Yeah.
Soon, the bill rates come down a little bit because there's more supply to meet the demand. Eventually, that wave crashes.
Yeah.
It happened. It happened to me with Java. It happened to me with with Windows Phone. There was never really a. But anyway, but this sort of thing happens. It happened with me with doing Perl CGI type work early in the day of the web and stuff like that. It happened with Visual Basic when I was doing that. Just because things are going in a vertical direction is not guaranteed it's going to stay in that vertical direction.
Right. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier when we had the funny question about that. It's hard to predict the future from the present or the past. It's just.
I love it when all our sidetracks kind of converge.
Well, we're doing that, man. It's
almost like we planned it, but we really didn't.
We're just good. Don't try this at home, kids.
We're trained professionals. So Thomas Duclos, getting back to the voice over,
those are good.
Is I should get Orlando Jones.
Orlando Jones, yes.
He also suggests James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones.
If I could afford James Earl Jones, it's a no-brainer. Like, it's done, right? I don't think we can. Pretty sure we can't afford Orlando Jones impersonating James Earl Jones.
Maybe.
But there was a Family Guy voiceover thing where they kind of did. We got this segment, to be narrated by Morgan Freeman.
That's who I was thinking. I was thinking Morgan Freeman would be the ultimate.
Right, he would be the ultimate one. And then it was like, but I came in to do the second sentence because Morgan Freeman was too expensive. And then somebody else comes on, it's like, and I sound a lot like, and I can impersonate Morgan Freeman, and I'm even cheaper than the first two. I don't know. Everything else they were talking about, I would not be comfortable saying, but it's definitely. I think it's the one where Meg goes to the Olympics. If you want to see the clip, but it's Family Guy, so you have been warned. Just saying.
Yes, not always.
No, not at all. So I mean, from my point of view, is if I were in my position where I was, where I was looking for a new kind of career shift from kind of client-end stuff into data, I would weigh it more on data engineering now, because no matter what happens, data has to get from point A to point B.
That's a really fair point. Yeah.
The shortest path, I think, for success is to go into data engineering. You're not going to be a ninja overnight, but you're not getting your head beat up by the crazy statistics and the math. Like mutual acquaintance of ours, when he completed the stats class, I think he completed it like 2 days after I did. And I'm like, oh my God. And then he said something, he made a comment that kind of stuck with me. He's like, as soon as I clean off the blood off the desk or something like that, I was just like, wow, somebody had it harder than me on that one. Okay.
It was, yeah. And I agree with you in that, Frank. I mean, it is, so data sources and data targets will change. But really, as a data engineer, what I have to kind of keep up with is the capabilities of the new engines that are out there. And I do a lot of work in Azure Data Factory these days. So,
but you parlayed your ninja-ness in SSIS into that.
Well, I appreciate that compliment. Like, it warms my heart. I always get a little worried when people say things like, as I like to say, experienced. But I was into SSIS early, and it took off like crazy. And it's still out there. You can still do it in Azure Data Factory, and there's quite a bit of work out there. And Microsoft has a really cool story. Now, Frank works for Microsoft, so he can't say that.
Full disclosure, I can't say.
I'm an MVP, a Microsoft MVP, but I've been saying this for decades anyway. Well, that's not true. I've been saying this for about a decade. If you look at the wars that have gone on for cloud services, Amazon was definitely ahead of the pack a few years ago. And Azure kind of came in a little later, but they started building up stuff. I think Google is still in that getting started phase, and I'd never rule them out. But when people ask me, who's going to win the war, I say my response is Azure is not going to win the cloud wars. And they look at me kind of, what? And I said, because
like the way I'm looking at you now.
Right, yeah, they already have one. But this is the way these things happen. I'm a farmer. You plant these seeds, you have chickens and you hatch these eggs, and they grow up, and eventually you get fruit from the plants or vegetables, and you get more eggs from the chickens. This is the way this works. And Azure has done a number of things right. And this is not throwing off on AWS, I promise. A lot of customers, we've helped move stuff into AWS and help them that way. This is not taking anything away from them. This is just the facts. This is physics, if you will, of the software industry, and especially with data. This is more of a game where it's not the early bird gets the worm. It's more of the second mouse gets the cheese. And I say it that way because AWS went in and they did a lot of things first. I remember 8 years ago when they put SQL Server in the cloud, the newest version ahead of Microsoft, and they did a lot of things right. But that's a recipe for technical debt. When you're right there leading, nobody else, you're out front. Right. it's like that scene in Forrest Gump where he says, "I ran so fast I realized I was all alone, and that was a bad thing." And it can be a bad thing.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, it's called the cutting edge because not just you're cutting into something, because you can cut yourself as well.
Yeah, and Azure did a lot. They learned a lot of those lessons. They built differently. Are they still, are they still running into technical debt? They are. But what I see, I think Microsoft gets undervalued all the time for their integration. I'm not talking about data integration. I'm just talking about integration. I think they get way, they're not getting the recognition they deserve for that. They've always thought that way. And what I've seen just on the outside looking in is that they not only changed the services that they offer in Azure to meet the demand, they went deeper. They changed cultures. They pivoted in a
right. No, that's true.
Since Satya came in. I mean,
I've worked at Microsoft under two CEOs, and it's a very different experience.
I get that. I totally get that. And they are learning these lessons, that come in maybe on the surface, right? You're trying to do this, and it just won't work. And what they do in response to it is often a much deeper response than it appears it needs to fix the problem on the surface. But I see these pivots happening all over. And
like seeds in the ground, like you say.
That's what I'm saying.
You may not see it right away. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And 4 or 5 years down the road, this will come to fruition. These things that they're doing. And I would not ever count out Bezos and the team there at AWS. I know some of the people over there. We've talked to some of the people over there. You and I have. And they're scary smart.
They are very smart. Yeah. I mean, I competed against Amazon when I was at Barnes & Noble. .com, and I think we know who won that fight.
Well, but I think this is going to be a much bigger and a more drawn out battle.
And yeah. Because the battle space, if you will, is much
never count. Never.
Yeah. So here's Thomas Duclos has just sent us a couple of comments. I like commenting on the folks on the live stream because, hey, you're taking your time out. That's cool. Yay. Yeah, I would love to pull lines off Bruce Almighty, but I'm sure the copyright police will come and get us, or the AI bots on YouTube. So this is interesting. Thomas also commented, it's a great Harvard, I'm assuming that HBR's Harvard Business Review use case that will be more recognized over time. Satya's pivot is educational and study worthy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, years from now, assuming we survive the viral apocalypse, people will be commenting on, this is where Microsoft was, this is where they were, just a few years later. I mean, just look, full disclosure, I work for Microsoft, I own Microsoft stock, blah, 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 right? Just look at a chart. That's what the market thinks right now. You can debate whether or not that's a valid indicator, but it is an indicator of success for sure.
Yep.
If you look at just any number of, by any metrics, I mean, it's definitely changed.
Yeah.
And I've read the book Hit Refresh and kind of his point of view about what he thought needed to be done. Is it Peter Drucker, the Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast quote? Is kind of what I think was kind of what he was saying. It's like, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have a culture that supports that strategy, it's not going to be executed.
Yeah,
which I think is
that's the deep piece that I see. I see a lot of
right, exactly. It ties back into that. It's like, you want to, it's just if you want to change where you are, you have to change the way you think. To change the way you think is one thing, but to change the way a group thinks,
right?
Well, not group think, but change it. More than one person thinks, you need a culture change.
And I find that that the leadership on culture is pretty big. I think that's something that I'm not sure if it's all Satya or not. I doubt that it's all him, but it has to start at the top if you're going to change culture.
Well, the one thing I've seen, and this isn't just about any one company, but anywhere I have worked, is that the CEO at any company that's over like 5 people cannot influence day-to-day decisions. It's just not, that doesn't scale. Because what does scale is their attitude and the culture that they want to portray.
Sure.
If you look at GE over the years,
Yeah.
right, or Jack Welch kind of put through one type of culture.
Yep.
Love him or hate him, right?
Yep.
Not a lot of people in the middle on that one. But I mean, the CEO sets the tone.
Yes.
And then the rest of the senior leadership also sets the tone, which kind of goes down. And there's a lot of things you can kind of see that, the whole notion of, people would repeat the phrase fail fast.
Yep.
Did they really mean it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, some people were just, repeating mantras that sounded cool, and they were a little,
Yes.
they were kind of cliche. You live for it,
But God help you if you actually failed. God help you.
for real.
But
But yeah, fail
but in
fast
terms
is a great
of,
way to do it.
yeah, I mean, as long as you learn, you don't do the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And I think that's really the key. So we're coming up on just about an hour. I
My
think.
goodness, has it been an hour already?
Yeah, it has been.
Wow, frankly.
I love doing these streams.
Same here.
So I will record the ending for the podcast here. So, and then if anyone has extra questions and stuff, we'll stick around for a minute or two. This is a book that just came. It's called The Price of Tomorrow. Plan on reading this. I'm at book 43 right now.
I think you finished 43. Yeah, you send me notes.
I have to look at that because the notes I tend not to just to brag.
No, it's encouraging.
But also it's my archive. I probably should write an app or something. But yeah. So this is this came highly reviewed, and it basically talks about deflation, the changing nature of labor, automation, that sort of thing. I don't know if it's yeah, check it out. I don't know if it's an audiobook.
I'm doing it right now. So that's the type.
Audible is a sponsor of ours. So if you go to thedatadrivenbook.com, they kick us back. I don't know. Maybe I can buy a Starbucks.
The Price of Tomorrow is an audible.
It is an audiobook. Okay, cool. You get one free audiobook on us, and if you sign up for their subscription, I mean, I would, but I don't just say that. I counted. They, unlike other companies, online properties, you actually do get rich statistics from Audible.
Yep.
Here,
Same here. I'm actually hitting. I'm getting it right now. I just clicked the complete purchase button. We do the, I think it's called the platinum plan.
Are you on the platinum? You're on the high money plan.
Well, I forget how much it is, but I still end up running out of credits. So, because a bunch of us are doing it now, like 3-4 of us here and I think Riley's the only one not listening to audiobooks.
And he's the youngest.
He's the youngest. He's about to turn Monday. He turns 13. So,
oh wow!
He was asking me. I'd been telling him he was a command sergeant, 12-year-old. He's asking me. He thinks he should be promoted when he reaches 13. So I really like that, command sergeant.
I like
something to But yes, Audible. Go ahead.
Oh no, Audible gives you really rich statistics in terms of what you see.
Yeah.
And it's for some reason it's delaying.
Sorry.
Loading on my thing, but anyway, you can actually see kind of how many. I think I'm at 248 titles in my library. Wow. I have no idea when.
Well, see, I could have more, but it's not just me, right? So,
Right.
The expand.
Well, I'm on the basic plan, so.
I was there for
Thomas Duclos actually has another thing here about presidential history and leadership. Oh, in terms of culture and kind of pushing that down. Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. Masterclass.com. I actually do have one course from them. I should probably look into that more. I should definitely do that. So thank you, Thomas.
I like that. Let's check that out.
But so they were a sponsor of the show, and be sure to check it out. We recorded this, if you haven't figured out already. We recorded this live on LinkedIn, and You have a great day. Any parting words of wisdom, Andy?
Now, Frank, just y'all, I love what you said. Y'all have a great
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. Be sure to let us know what